We have a hurricane impacting the Turks and Caicos Islands. Good Saturday evening. I'm Mike Naso with this 11 p.m. Eastern Time update on the tropics. When we take a look out there, we have two systems. The system here on the left side of the screen is what's left of Tropical Storm Nadine, made landfall over Belize earlier on Saturday and causing some heavy rainfall. Very large moisture envelope, but it is overland weakening. And then we have our Hurricane Oscar, developed very quickly from that tropical wave we watched move all the way across the Atlantic. And then just throughout the day on Saturday, tropical storm hurricane, boom, boom. And that is Hurricane Oscar impacting areas here of the Turks and Caicos Islands. Here's the latest as of 11 p.m. Eastern Time on the hurricane. The center of Hurricane Oscar was at 21.3 north, 72.2 west, and winds are 85 miles per hour. So it's a potent little Category 1 hurricane, and it's moving west at 12 miles per hour, 987 millibars with the barometric pressure. The forecast has it maybe moving west-southwest underneath the ridge of high pressure and making landfall in eastern Cuba. Afterwards, we'll see it weaken to a tropical storm and then feel the influence from a very strong trough, which will take it and just punch it right off towards the northeast in the general direction of Bermuda in the long run, but not before impacting the Bahamas there. So we're going to have to deal with Oscar here, not only in the Turks and Caicos, but also in the Bahamas. We do have hurricane warnings in effect for the Turks and Caicos Islands, the southeastern Bahamas, and the eastern coastline of Cuba, including Guantanamo Bay, with the expectation of a landfall in eastern Cuba. This area does get hit occasionally, but it is rare, as systems are usually either turning more north or overland to the south. It's kind of hard to get them right there into southeastern Cuba. But again, areas there of eastern Cuba have been hit before. Remember in 2017, Hurricane Irma ravaged the northern coastline there of Cuba. So when I say the hurricane's small, I mean it is small. Hurricane force winds are only 5 miles away from the eye of the hurricane, and tropical storm force winds only 45 miles. Now, some of these islands are being impacted by tropical storm force winds, and if I show you the satellite, you can see that even better. It's not a very impressive hurricane. We don't have a well-defined eye. Obviously, it's flat here on the northwest side. It might be feeling some northwesterly shear. Nevertheless, it does appear to be feeling the impact from the ridging to the north here, pushing it. So it should be impacting areas here of Anagua Island and then eventually the coastline of Cuba. In fact, if I look at where the map is here, I'm going to zoom in here to show you where the eye of the hurricane is. It's very near Coburn town and Coburn Harbor here. That's pronounced Coburn, by the way. Otherwise, it would be painful. And then we have it moving here south of the Caicos in the general direction of Anagua Island. So again, Little Anagua is right here, and then we have Grand Anagua. It looks like with the southwest component to the track, it will impact Great Anagua Island rather, and then head towards the coastline of Cuba. So again, hurricane force winds, you could have maximum sustained winds of 85 miles per hour right around the eye, but again, 5 miles around that eye. So you're talking about a very small area, so you could miss it if you're not directly around the eye, but if it hits you, it's a hurricane. So obviously, hurricane warnings out for all of these locations here. Stay out of the water, stay away from windows. If it impacts you directly, head to the interior of your home until the eye of the hurricane passes. Again, it looks like it will make landfall. This is the 11 p.m. track right over Anagua Island and then into Cuba. Again, it should make landfall over the island sometime early in the morning and then should make landfall in Cuba by later on Sunday night. So again, this is an interesting hurricane. It's a fascinating one. It's a fascinating track this time of year. Thankfully, the intensity is not going to be too high, but it's a hurricane. So it's something we're going to have to watch. And again, and I mentioned, it's going to turn back towards the Bahamas. So again, if you're in the middle Bahamas, like Long Island up here, you could have an impact by the time early next week arrives. Here's the infrared satellite imagery. And again, not very impressive. Definitely a hurricane, but a weak hurricane, Category 1. But 85 miles an hour is a mid-range Category 1. And I do think that this outflow from Nadine is impacting it, and also probably this high to its north pushing southward. All of that's kind of squishing little Oscar there. And one of the storm chasers on X tweeted out that he's calling Oscar a cutie cane. Sometimes we lose our minds a little bit in the weather community, so we're calling Oscar a cutie cane. It ain't cute if you're in that eye wall with 85-mile-an-hour winds, though. So again, in Great Inagua Island, hunkered down over the next 6 to 10 hours, you guys are going to get lashed by Hurricane Oscar. Here's a better look at that wind shear. Look at this wind shear in red. Holy cow. Ripping just to the north. The hurricane is right in here. And so there's the outflow from Nadine. Thank goodness Nadine moved inland in Belize, because with those hot Caribbean waters, Nadine would have been a major hurricane if it was over water for a long time. Definitely a hurricane, probably a major hurricane, but it didn't have enough time, so it came in as a tropical storm. But the outflow in combination with that approaching trough that'll eventually lift our Oscar out, just very unfavorable wind shear. But Oscar found this little safe harbor here just to the north of Hispaniola over the Turks and Caicos. The computer models, these are the European ensembles. They bring Oscar inland over Cuba and then loop it back around. Note here, in 96 hours, Bermuda. Keep an eye just in case. It could be a larger system by then and pull off to the northeast. The GFS models, some of them want to bring it into the Caribbean. That would be interesting. Does Oscar, I mean, obviously weaken over eastern Cuba, rough terrain, but does Oscar get into the Caribbean Sea and then head northeast? So we'll wait and see. But right now it looks like it's just going to make landfall in Cuba and then hook back around. So again, we could have a 1-2 strike on the areas there of the Bahamas and the Turks and Caicos. I don't think it'll bend all the way back to the Turks and Caicos, but it could. So again, moisture, heavy rainfall, 4 to 6 inches, especially in areas there of eastern Cuba, and say 2 to 4 inches across most of the Bahamas and the Turks and Caicos. Kind of a rainy, wet, soaked time, and definitely windy there over the Inaguas where the eye of the hurricane moves. So the key messages for Hurricane Oscar: number 1, hurricane warning remains in effect for the Turks, Caicos, southeastern Bahamas, and the northern coastline of Cuba. Number 2, Oscar is expected to produce a dangerous storm surge in areas of the Turks and Caicos Islands and southeastern Bahamas tonight and along the north shore of Cuba later on Sunday. Not a tremendously huge storm surge, but a water rise that's dangerous. Number 3, heavy rainfall from Oscar will lead to areas of flash flooding and the potential of mudslides across areas of eastern Cuba, especially there in the north coast, this very mountainous terrain in eastern Cuba. You guys could have some heavy flooding. Nadine, tropical depression Nadine, down to 35 miles an hour, moving west at 14. Again, it developed and it had a very impressive envelope, but it was so close to landfall, it made landfall in Belize. It did not have time to become a hurricane or a strong hurricane, which it would have done. Thankfully, it's now inland, weakening. However, there is a chance that the rainfall could still be very high over areas of Mexico, upwards of 6, 10, 12 inches in some locations, and that could cause dangerous flash flooding and mudslides. Again, don't want to see that flooding, so we'll watch as the rainfall moves towards the Pacific. And there is a chance, by the way, look at the GFS ensembles, that whatever's left of Nadine will spit out into the Pacific Ocean and take a long track way out at sea over the next week or so. But some of the GFS models show it becoming a major hurricane out here. Now, as it dissipates, if it's not the same system, it won't be Nadine anymore. It would get the next name on the Eastern Pacific list, which is Christie. So we'll see if Christie forms there in the Eastern Pacific. Looking at the name list, we are making our way through. Obviously, we'll never see another Beryl. We'll definitely never see another Helene. I doubt we'll see another Milton. Hopefully, Oscar isn't that bad, and we'll see that name again in 6 years when we reuse this name list. Could we see Patty, Raphael, Sarah, and Tony? It's possible. It was a very active hurricane season, very backloaded. We had that quiet August that fooled us all, but boy, did it make up for it. Look at the long-range European. Nothing there yet, but look at the Caribbean. This is sometime around Halloween. Could we see another tropical storm, hurricane, major hurricane in the Western Caribbean? I think we might. I'm Mike Naso with the latest on Hurricane Oscar. Turks, Caicos, and Aguas, northern coastline of Cuba. Look out. This is a very, very tiny little thing, but it is a hurricane and is headed towards land. I'm Mike Naso with the latest on Tiny Oscar, and I'll talk to you next time.